Hello everyone and welcome to my review for Xenoblade 3 on the Nintendo Switch. Xenoblade 3 was released on July 29th of 2022 for the Nintendo Switch. Xenoblade 1 and 2 were games I both really enjoyed, so I was really looking forward to Xenoblade 3. So was Xenoblade 3 really good and is it worth buying? Let's get right into that in this review. Xenoblade 3 takes place in the world of Ionis, where there's a war between two opposing nations being Kevs and Agnes. The game has you playing the role of the main character Noah, who is a soldier of the nation of Kevs. At the beginning of the game, after a successful and victorious battle against the Agnian colony, Noah and his group of soldiers are given a mission to intercept a mysterious airship. They eventually get to it and they have to battle a group of Agnian soldiers. However, in the middle of the battle, the survivor of the airship tells them to stop and that he knows who their true enemy is. Shortly after that, he is killed, but before he dies, he tells Noah and the other soldiers that they must make it to an area called Sword March and that they will find out everything there. Noah and his group of soldiers and also the group of soldiers that they were fighting, they are both wanted by the nations of Kevs and Agnes after they unlock a mysterious power called Ouroboros. They then team up together to make their way towards Sword March to find out answers to everything that is going on. So that's a little bit about what the story of Xenoblade 3 is about. Now let's start talking about the gameplay of Xenoblade 3. Xenoblade 3 in terms of gameplay has a lot of similarities with previous Xenoblade games. You'll travel across large areas fighting monsters, leveling your characters, and trying to become as powerful as you can. One of the big changes with Xenoblade 3 from prior Xenoblade games is the amount of characters you can battle with. In Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade X, and Xenoblade 2, you battle with 3 characters. However, in Xenoblade 3, this is different. You can now have up to 7 party members to battle with at once. 6 of the game's main characters, and then for the 7th character, you can use what are called hero characters. Hero characters will join you in the main story and also by completing side quests. In Xenoblade 3, as with other Xenoblade games, you'll come across enemies as you travel through areas. Battle will start once you run up to the enemies and attack them, or if they run up to you and attack you. During battle, you'll auto-attack enemies until you do another command. As you auto-attack during battle, you'll build up arcs for your characters to use against enemies. Arcs in Xenoblade 3 are basically skills that you can use during battle once you build them up, and you can use them to do a lot more damage to enemies, reduce aggro towards a certain character. Some of them can also heal, and others will do more damage if you hit the enemy from the side with the art or from behind. So it all depends on the ability and the art that you end up using during battle. Just like in Xenoblade 2, upon hitting an enemy with an auto attack, you can cancel an attack into an art and you'll get certain bonuses for doing so. A brand new gameplay mechanic in Xenoblade 3 is the interlink mechanic. 2 characters combine into what is called their Ouroboros form, a larger form with more powerful moves for a temporary amount of time. This adds more depth to the combat, and it's a pretty cool, interesting mechanic that they added to Xenoblade 3. Also returning from previous Xenoblade games is the chain attack system during battles. On the right side of the screen, you fill up the chain attack gauge, and once it's filled up all the way, you can activate a chain attack by pressing the chain attack button. The chain attacks in Xenoblade 3 have got to be the best in the series so far. During chain attacks, you can choose from a lot of different attacks to do. Some of them will ignore enemy defense. Others will heal your characters and give them HP regeneration for a temporary amount of time. And because of all the different types of attacks you have to do, the chain attacks can give you a lot of benefits, and they can also do a lot of damage to the enemy that you're fighting. During chain attacks, if you build them up right, you can also do what is called an Ouroboros order, which is a very powerful, very cool attack that does a lot of damage to the enemy you're fighting. The better you do a chain attack, the more the damage multiplier will build for the chain attack and the more damage you can do. It's very fun during chain attacks to build the damage multiplier up as high as you can and do as much damage as possible. Not only do you do so much damage with a chain attack, but if you kill an enemy with a chain attack, you get a multiplier to the EXP you obtain from defeating that enemy, and so defeating an enemy with a chain attack can be very beneficial in Xenoblade 3. Overall, not only is the chain attack system returning in this game so good, but another great feature of Xenoblade 3 is that the game has a character class system. When you defeat enemies in the game, not only will you obtain EXP for leveling, but you can also get class points as well. Class points are used to level up your job classes. Similar to Xenoblade X, where you had character classes you could give to characters and you could change character classes, Xenoblade 3 brings the system back and has character classes that you can level up to learn new abilities and that are separated into 3 different roles. There are attacker class roles, which basically focus on doing as much damage as possible. There are defender classes, which focus on tanking the enemy and taking as much damage as possible and preventing the enemy from hitting weaker defensive party members. And then there's a third role, which is a healer, which of course focuses on healing people and also buffing their stacks and keeping everybody healed and alive. The character class system is really great because it brings a lot of character customization back for your characters, and there's a lot of different class combinations you can try in the game. As you progress through the story of Xenoblade 3, and you also unlock some of the hero characters, generally a lot of the time when you unlock a new hero character, you'll also unlock a new character class you can choose for your characters as well. Now in Xenoblade 3, not only do you get EXP for defeating enemies, but you also get class points which are used to level up your classes so that they can learn new abilities. In terms of other aspects of the gameplay, such as the exploration and the tracking of quests, Xenoblade 3 brings a lot of quality of life improvements. You can now track quests a lot better. For example, when you have a quest and you're tracking it, there's a red line you can now follow to your destination and it takes you to where you need to go for the quest, and that really helps out a lot for tracking quests. In general, finding where to go for quests and side quests is a lot better in this game, especially compared to previous Xenoblade games, and it's a very welcome gameplay improvement in Xenoblade 3. Xenoblade 3 has really good gameplay. Now I'll get into some of the flaws later, but I want to talk about the story next. So the story of Xenoblade 3 is also pretty good as well. The main characters are pretty well written. I think that the characters in the game were pretty well developed, and I really liked most of the main characters in the game. There were no real characters that I kind of disliked, but I do think that the antagonists in the game are kind of weak. A lot of the antagonists in the game are kind of like these, cartoonishly like evil bad guys who are just evil for the sake of being evil, and they don't really have like deep, interesting motivations. And so there are a few really good antagonists in the game, but a lot of them are just kind of like these pure evil antagonists. And many of the antagonists just didn't have really interesting character backstories or much to them. And I felt that a lot of the antagonists in the game were kind of forgettable. They were nothing really special, and so that is kind of a weakness of the story. But overall, the main characters are good. A few of the antagonists are really good. I think that the story is pretty well written, and the story in the game is overall pretty good. But now I want to get into some of the flaws of Xenoblade 3, because this game definitely has some flaws. So let's get into some of the flaws with Xenoblade 3. So the first flaw of Xenoblade 3, I think, is the music. Xenoblade 1 and 2 had amazing game soundtracks. In Xenoblade 3, it has Yasunori Mitsuda, who's the guy that worked on Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, and then it has a few other composers as well. And I felt most of the music in this game, it was just kind of okay. Like, it wasn't bad. It wasn't like anything where I was like, wow, this music's really bad, but most of it was just forgettable. I would hear it once, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool, and then I would forget about it. In Xenoblade 1 and 2, a lot of the songs, almost all the songs in those game soundtracks were so good that I would go on YouTube or listen to them in general. And I just felt that the music, especially in the areas of the game, was very forgettable in most of Xenoblade 3. I really didn't remember most of the soundtrack, and the soundtrack is a massive disappointment. And when you got guys like Yasunori Mitsuda, who worked on the Chrono Trigger soundtrack, Chrono Cross, Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade 2, and he did an amazing job on those game soundtracks, it's not acceptable when you get to Xenoblade 3 and almost the entire soundtrack is just forgettable. That's what a lot of the music is. It's forgettable, it's nothing really special, and it's very disappointing. So the soundtrack is definitely one of the game's big flaws. The soundtrack is easily among the weakest of the Xenoblade series. It's very, very disappointing compared to Xenoblade 1 and 2. Now, a flaw with the gameplay is, as I mentioned earlier, you have a job class system in the game and you level up by getting class points from defeating enemies. Well, the problem is in Xenoblade 3 that you can get bonus EXP from discovering areas and doing stuff in the game. And you can use that at areas where you rest to level up your characters. And at certain points of the game, you can get a lot of level ups from the bonus EXP. And because of that, you can end up out-leveling the enemies by a few levels at certain story areas. And what this leads to is that you can no longer get class points for defeating those enemies, so you can't level up your job character classes until you find higher level enemies. And this is a major problem with the class system in the game. There is a feature that does allow you to level down, but you don't unlock it all the way until New Game Plus. And this is really bad because it prevents you from experimenting with the character classes in the game, and it makes you have to get to the next story area to continue leveling the job character classes. Another problem I found with Xenoblade 3's gameplay is the character AI. So in some RPG games where you have AI characters that you can't control, you can give them certain AI options, like to heal you at half health or to do something at a certain percentage. And in Xenoblade 3, the lack of AI options in this game is very disappointing. It's a major problem with the AI. And I have many boss fights where my healers could heal me, but the AI chose not to heal me, and as a result, I got a game over. And so that was a big problem for me with this game. The only real solution I found for this problem was to basically make the character I was controlling into a healer class and do the healing myself. The AI really needs to be improved in future Xenoblade games. And it's really a shame compared to other games with AI allies out there, how you really can't customize the AI that much in Xenoblade 3. They really need to work on this for the next Xenoblade game. So another thing with Xenoblade 3 that really bothered me, it was that in Xenoblade 3, the game world of the game is not nearly as good as Xenoblade 2 or especially 1. Xenoblade 1 has one of the coolest game world ideas ever. The entire game world of Xenoblade 1 takes place on two giant living, breathing robots that you travel across. And in Xenoblade 2, they had the Titans, which were flying monsters that were the size of entire continents. And in Xenoblade 3, there's nothing really unique to the world whatsoever. It's basically a generic fantasy world, and there's nothing that separates it and makes it stand out compared to Xenoblade 2 or 1. Keep in mind, when I'm talking about Xenoblade 3's game world, I'm talking about it from a story perspective, not a gameplay perspective. From a gameplay perspective, it's still really good, it's still really cool to explore. It's just in terms of the uniqueness of the world and how it compares in the lore and the story, it just isn't as good as Xenoblade 1 or 2's world. There's one more thing I wanted to discuss when it comes to things that people might not like about Xenoblade 3. So I always talk about, what type of games are for what people, and the Xeno series is very story heavy, and Xenoblade 3 is no exception. So if you're somebody who you dislike long story scenes, that might be something that really bothers you with Xenoblade 3. Later in the game, there are long story segments where for an hour straight, there is almost no gameplay whatsoever, and it's one cutscene after another in the story. Overall, Xenoblade 3 is a really good game. I really enjoyed it. It has some problems, but overall, I think it might be one of the best RPGs of 2022. It is a long game. It will take you probably at least 50 hours to finish. Overall, though, I want to say a big thank you for watching the review. It's really greatly appreciated. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I really greatly appreciate it. Also, make sure to follow me over on twitch.tv/Shockstorm, where I stream games that I eventually review. Thank you all so much for watching the video. I really greatly appreciate it, and I want to say a big thank you to you all, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all so much.